Good afternoon. I'm Apostle T.B. Walker. Well, I guess I should say good evening. I'm Apostle T.B. Walker. I want to take this time to welcome you to our Thursday night live Bible study. Certainly glad to have you here. Listen, we're going to be picking up once again out of the book of Exodus, chapter 25. I'm going to be reading chapter 10 through 11. God is now preparing to do something wonderful in the midst of the children of Israel. He's going to dwell with them. But now he's giving some divine instructions on exactly what the dwelling place is supposed to look like, this tabernacle that he's giving to Moses in a vision that Moses is meant to design specifically like God said it. Now, here's what he says in verse 10 through 11. And they shall make an ark of acacia wood. 2.5 cubits shall be its length, 1.5 cubits its width, and 1.5 cubits its height. And you shall overlay it with pure gold inside and out. You shall overlay it. You shall make on it a molding of gold all around. So God tells Moses to make an ark. Now, you know, this word that we use here, that's seen here as ark, is mentioned in correlation to several other things in the Bible. One of those is Noah's ark. We see this ark that is this huge, gigantic boat that houses all of the humans, the 8 people that are left, and all the animal life 2 by 2 that God has brought upon the ark. This happens actually before the flood. Now, the construction of the ark that God is talking about here is actually constructed after the children of Israel reach Sinai. It is not a boat. It's this place is where God has given Moses the commandments and the other laws. Now, it's constructed for this purpose. It's not a boat. It is a golden chest. It's a chest made out of acacia wood, and then it's overlaid with gold. And it's part of the broader effort to establish a system of worship and a covenant relationship with God. Now, understand this. They didn't know how to worship. A system of worship is how you are to worship. The knowledge that you are to worship is one place. The knowledge that God is holy comes from us, right? The idea that God is holy, we can actually project that on God. But it's God who establishes not only his holiness, but God is the one who defines for us what his holiness is, what's set apart, and what being set apart as God is, that's different than being set apart as a man. They didn't know how to worship him. They didn't know what would please God. They didn't know what he wanted. They are being introduced to God, and being introduced to God means you also have to be introduced to the system of worship. And the system of worship is the way to worship. We don't just worship God however we want to worship him, because he is holy, he is sovereign, but God is highly intelligent, meaning that there is that which he wants, that which he desires, and that which he expects. And God does not expect without first teaching us exactly what it means to be holy, what it means to be God. There's these concepts that come from Egypt. They have no understanding about real God. They know about these fake gods. They know about these demigods, these people who, appear to be gods. And they say they're gods, but they are not gods. They're human, or there's some statues that are there. So these children of Israel don't know. They've gotten worship from Egypt. They've gotten worship from foreign people. They have not gotten it directly from God. And if you're going to worship God, the true and living God, your worship has got to come from God. Listen, the truth of the matter is God not only commands us to worship him, but then God comes and he tells us exactly what will please him. He gives us a cheat sheet. He tells us exactly what he wants from us. So, it's God's desire here to be with his people. It's clear. So he builds a place right in the midst of them, right where they are, in the middle of the camp, so he can dwell among them. That's exactly what he said. Now, you remember the Old Testament, as we are now in this New Testament dispensation, as we're looking back at the Old Testament, God dwelled among his people. But that was a symbol of what God was going to do. That was awesome. Had it not been done in human history, yet it was only a shadow of what God was going to do. Even in our time, the Old Testament, God dwelled among the people. Now God dwells in the people. Right? There's a day we will dwell with God bodily. We will have new bodies. We will be able to withstand his glory and be able to see him face to face. But, you notice that the first thing that is done here is the building of this ark. The first item that God tells Moses to build is this ark, this portable gold-covered wooden chest. It's a chest made of acacia wood, layered in gold. And this is probably the most important piece of all the furnishings that you're going to find in the tabernacle. Of all the pieces associated with this tabernacle, this is the most important because it's modeled after the throne of God in heaven. Every portion of the tabernacle is special. There's no place that is just, random. There's nothing here that is done ramshackle. Everything here comes from a divine design. But it is God here who places this one first. He says, this is going to be the thing that I want you to make first. Hands down, it's the most important feature that you'll find because it describes the approach that we take to God. God wanted to dwell with us, but this is how we approach him. This is a symbol of God providing a way for us to come to him. Listen, later he will say, come to me, all you that are burdened or heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. We can't come to God without God first making a way for us to do it. As we come to him now through Jesus. We couldn't come our own way. We could not be brought before the throne. Now unto him that is able to keep us from falling and then to present us before God faultless. That's Jesus, who's made a way for us to come to God. Well, God is doing that exact same thing here right now in this wilderness. He's creating a way for them to come to him. This ark is directly connected to salvation of God's people, right? And the Ark of the Covenant was built under the divine instructions that God gave to Moses. God instructed it. You know what that means? That means that salvation is not of us. That means that our worship is not of us. That means that the actions that we take as believers, we are bought with a price, which means that we don't do whatever we want to do. Listen, we have a will. Jesus showed us that even in the garden. He says, nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done. So God is now preparing a way. He's showing Moses the importance of the way to get to him. There are other things that are really important. There are other things that need to be there. There's some things that are ceremonial that are not frivolous whatsoever. But the most important thing is the approach to God, the place that we get to when we're trying to get to God. And the way is now in this ark. The way is to get to God, who is his presence looms over the mercy seat. His presence comes out and it's able to be felt, and even in some cases to even be seen. But it's clearly to be known that God is there, that his presence is there. Jesus now comes and says, I am the way. You realize that this, once again, is a shadow of Christ. It's a shadow of what is to come, who is Jesus. The Jesus who's going to come, who's going to sit on that mercy seat. The Jesus who's going to come, who's going to lay out down his life and pave a way for us to get to Christ. To get to God, the Father. This is exactly what God is doing right now. He's putting out this ark in the same way he gave his son. They needed a way to get to him. God says, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whoever believed in him would not perish, but have everlasting life. Whoever believed in this God, whoever took this approach to him would not perish. The reality is that that's what God is doing. I'm showing you, not only am I directing and constructing an approach that man can take to me, right, to God, but it's at the very same time, it is God's willingness first. That's one of the things that we have to look at. It's God's willingness first. It's not that, man needed to get to God, so God decided to make a way. No, God initiated this without man ever knowing that he needed it, without man ever knowing that this was something that he was missing, without man clamoring for it or trying to pull on God's coattail, for a way to get to God. When nobody was looking for God, he loved us, even when we were not concerned about him whatsoever. Moses was comfortable trying to get to the promised land. Moses was trying to get to this new land and to begin to set up government. Moses was not in any way. He had already had his approach to God. So he was fine. Moses was good. The people they knew where God was. There was no expectation that there would be an approach to God. There was no expectation that God would create a road so that we would get to him, that he would make a way in the desert so that man could dwell with him. And he came down to us. That's not about how awesome we are. That's about how awesome God is. Why? We could not get to him. We were too sinful to get to him. We were disqualified to get to him. Yet now he creates a way to get to us. And that's what God is doing in your life every single day. He's creating ways. We think God's creating ways for me to be wealthy. God's creating ways for you to get to him. He's creating ways for you to see the footprint that he's making in your life. He's creating ways right now so you can be thankful for those dangers that you did not know, that God is even starting to reveal to people. You didn't know that they were against you. You had no idea. But that's not like, oh God, listen, you know what? I mean, I thank you. Now I know the snakes in the grass. No, this is God saying, I was for you when everybody else was against you. Listen, the reality is when you had nothing to show for it, when there was no reason for me to be for you, I was for you. When there was no reason for me to be on your side, I was on your side. When you murmured and complained, these people did not believe God after the Red Sea. They didn't believe God after they were kicked out of Egypt. They were pushed out the exact same way that God said that they're going to be thrust out, but they're not going to go empty. They've got gold. They've got earrings. They've got all kinds of precious metals. They've got everything they need on their backs. God's providing water from rocks. He's providing quail. He's giving them manna from heaven. All of these things are here, and yet these people murmured and complained. They were not grateful at all. And what does God do? He does not rear back and throw the lightning bolt. He began to construct a way that these wayward people could come to him. Why? Because unless we come to him, we stay wayward. Unless we get into his presence, we will not be clean. You must get into the presence of God to be cleansed by God. That's exactly what he desires. I know who they are. I know their brokenness. I know their dysfunction. So as God is creating this ark, it is a healing place for all the dysfunctions of the past, everything that they've gone through, all the PTSD, everything that's caused them to be fearful, everything that's caused them no longer to be risk takers, everything that's happened to them that's made them the people that they are. God is creating a healing station. Listen, if they come to me, all you that are burdened and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Everything that your mind is just running around, trying to figure out all the things that go bump in the night that make you afraid. God is building a way station, a healing station, a bomb station right in the midst of the desert. No matter what's happening with you, come to me. See, listen, we're finding out the answer is Jesus today. Come to me. Come to me, all you that are burdened and heavy laden. It's not going to be your politicians. It's not going to be the school system. It's not going to be any systems of the world. Jesus says, come to me. And the very same thing that he was saying with all the cares that were there, no matter what your question is, I am the answer. Well, guess what? The very same thing today, no matter what your question is, God, Jesus is saying, I'm the answer. So he tells Moses, listen, I want you to overlay it. I want you to make this out of acacia wood, but you should overlay it with gold inside and out. And make it a molding of gold all around. Now we've got this acacia wood, 3 feet, 3.9 feet long. It's 2.3 inches wide. So when you look at this is 2.3 inches high. So this is really not that big of a chest. I mean, when you look at it, it's really a small item. 3 feet 9 inches long. That's not very long. It's not that big. I mean, that's an arm's width. That's the ark. It's not ornate. It's beautiful, but there's probably more beautiful chests in the world as it pertains to the natural. There's probably some more. Surely there's more ornate things that have been, the Fabergé eggs are, more ornate than what appears to be here. But what this is precious, that which cannot be seen. Listen, what cannot be duplicated is the presence of God. This is a wooden chest with gold over top of it. But this primary role of this chest is to contain these 2 tablets of stone that are written with the finger of God. Right. That's why, as you look at it later, it's designated as the Ark of the Testimony. Now, we know it's also the Ark of the Covenant, but later it's also called the Ark of the Testimony. And there's a reason for that, because when you look at this Ark of the Testimony, this is where God now, he says, those tablets are going to go in there because I'm testifying of my will. My people know I've given my direct testimony concerning what my will is. That's why this is so important. It carries the word of God. It carries the intentions of God. And as the ark carried those around wherever they went, it was a portable a portable ark where, it was on staves, and they carried it around with them wherever they went in the wilderness. We are to carry around the very same Spirit of God with the testimony of God that he has written upon the tables of our heart, not only concerning what he wants us to do, but concerning who we are. We don't get our identities from other places. The children of Israel were not going to get their identity from anywhere else. They were not going to be like the other nations around them. They were not going to get their identity from where they came from, which was Egypt. God now, through this testimony, was testifying not only about him and his will, but he was also testifying about their identity. He's now identifying them with every thou shalt not. He's carving out a brand new identity for them. Every time he says, and you shall, he's carving out a brand new identity. The things that make them peculiar, the things that no other nations around them are doing, the foods that they can and cannot eat are about one thing. I'm going to make you peculiar. I am now establishing a brand new identity. You are becoming a people. Listen, no matter who you are, whether you're an American, whether you're Canadian, whether you're Mexican, whether you're European, it doesn't matter where you are. Whether you're in Asia, whether you're in Antarctica, it doesn't matter. Your identity does not come from the continent from which you were born, right? It does, when it comes down to statistics, it does when it comes down to census taking, when the government asks us questions, but the truth of our identity comes from the testimony of God, that when God testified about who these people are, he was now creating their identity and saying, these are my people. Those who fall under this identification, those who are willing to submit to being identified like this, these are my people. If my people who are called by my name, listen, get that. God stamps them with his name when he testifies according to his will. Listen, when he tells them his will is that they will be his people. His will is that they will hear and heed the testimony that he's given. His will is clear and direct. This is who I am. I am holy. And that I require you to be holy. I am set apart. I require you to be set apart as well. Listen, this word was meant to direct them in their duty. And listen, you got to understand something. As believers, we have a duty. We've gotten so accustomed to, I got to be there for the revival. My duty is to make sure I'm right there when such and such is preaching. If we got a guest preacher here, I must be there. No, you got a greater duty than that. Holiness is your duty. Living a set-apart life is your duty. Listen, looking like and acting like the believer that you're supposed to be is your duty. And when I'm saying looking like, I'm not talking about clothes. I'm talking about the attitude that you wear, the garment of praise that you carry around with you. That's the thing that has to happen. So when you look at this was not only a testimony for them concerning who they are, but it will also act as a testimony against them. That the fact is, my will. When you look at the vision of the ark that you see in Revelations 11:19, it presents this profound theological statement that you'll see about the continuity and the fulfillment of God's promises. That's what you really see. You begin to see that God continues on, and his way never changes. And eventually you see this shadow of the throne, the shadow of what heaven will look like. The ark was a shadow of that which is to come. The ark was a shadow of our home. And guess what? We are also now living shadows of that which is to come. We're to live like we are looking toward another place, that where our rules don't come from here. Our morality doesn't come from here. Our sense of righteousness does not come from this world. Listen, there's imagery here of the heavenly temple that's being shown here. And it signifies something that I think is so important that I don't want you to miss. It signifies the completion of God's plan. When you begin to look at the ark, the start out of a people, the beginning of a people who don't have a name, a people who are, they're called Hebrews, but they'll be called later the children of Israel. They'll be called by God's name, right? These people are a part of his plan. But when you see the ark and you recognize that that's a shadow of what's to come, and then you look at Revelations and you see that's the completion of what God started, you will see that this enduring covenant is valid. That God is promising you're in a covenant. You're in the right place. You're connected to he that cannot change. You're connected to the one who's holding you in the covenant. Listen, the wonderful thing about being in the midst, God did not need to just sit right there in the midst of them, but they needed him to be there. The children of Israel needed God to be there. He did not need to be there. His presence is so powerful that they saw him, from a mountain. So he did not need to be there. You know why he came? He came because they needed him. They needed to feel him. They needed to know that he's there. Listen, you need to know that he's there. And I'm not talking about mind tricks. God wants to do the exact same thing. I know your weaknesses. I know your fears. I know all the things that are holding you back. I know every hindrance that's in your life. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to come to you. I'm going to come where you are. I'm near you, even in your very mouth. When you hear what that scripture says, I am near you right now, even in your very mouth. If you call upon the name of the Lord, listen, that's why he came. I want you to understand I answer before you call. Before they ever even thought of calling, he was already there. Before they ever said, I wish he was close to us, he was already there. Listen, God was already making a plan before you had a problem. So your way out was already constructed. God is constructing the answer to every problem they're going to have. He's constructing the way out of every hole they're going to dig themselves in, every prison they're going to put themselves in, every rock in a hard place that they're going to get behind. Listen, I want you to understand something. God is making the way of escape. And just like the way of escape was there before they ever needed escape, he's the same God. He's doing the same thing in your life right now. He's already created the escape. The ark is in you. If you will call upon the name of the Lord, you're going to see that things will change. Things must change. Listen, the enemy can have no sway over your life. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and you just need to see it. The thing about the Ark of the Covenant is that they needed to keep their eyes stayed on God. The issue here was, don't look at your enemies. You're going to be outnumbered. Don't look at the people around you. You're going to be unloved. Listen, don't look at anybody around you. You're going to look peculiar. There's nothing like you, and you're going to be outnumbered, ostracized, marginalized, hated, all of the above. But I want you to understand something. I am with you. If you have me, don't look at your enemy. Don't look at the problems that are around you. Don't look at your finances. I want you to keep your eyes stayed on me, because that's where you get perfect peace. Well, okay, peace is great. But what about that thing in front of me? Listen, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Listen, when you have perfect peace, you can have arrows all around you, and you can stand still looking for the way of escape. You're not looking to dodge the arrows. You're not looking to get a better defense game. You are looking with an eye for a window or a door or a crack, because you know how your God works. You're looking in inconceivable places because you know that he does exceeding and abundantly above anything you could ask or think. So listen, God is building an ark here. He's building something in your life right now. And he's in the midst of whatever you're going through. And the way of escape has already been made. Listen, if you will just stand still and see, you don't have to ask anything. Just stand still and see. When they looked upon the ark, they were emboldened. When they looked at the ark, they were encouraged. I felt like I was by myself. Then I saw him. God manifested himself. You're not alone. The ark is right in the midst of your family. The ark is right in the midst of your life. God has come to where you are, and he's dwelling with you. Listen, you ought to show off by living right. I hope that this Bible study touched you. I hope that it enlightened you, and it began to show you once again this wonderfully penned love letter where God is saying, I'm doing everything to be near you. come to me. I am right here. Matter of fact, I'm near you, even in your very mouth. Receive that right now in Jesus' name. God bless you. Have an awesome rest of your Thursday evening.